Hi, my name's Tom Cockerill and I'm here today to introduce you to the new KO Esprit 4 radio. Okay, so this is a new radio. It's a normal 2-stick radio. It's got a much cleaner look from the previous radio. You've got some new menu buttons, you've got a new jog wheel. It's still the same slim KO design, which feels great in your hands, and you still have the hooks for your fingers on the rear. Another great feature for travelling is the aerial removes and can then be stored in the battery compartment just there. Okay, so if you open up the main menu using the enter button, you'll see we have all these sub-menus, and the first one we're going to look at is the model menu. On here you can select the model, rename your model, copy the model you're currently in to another model number, and reset the model you are currently in. So we just go into the select, you press enter once more, and it just gives you the list to go down. Obviously you can see ones I've got pre-done, and we'll just start on model number 1. Press back, takes you to the model menu, and here we can name the model. You just enter whatever you want and you copy it to another one if you so wish. Any setting that's in a black rectangle, you have to hold the enter button for it to happen rather than just press it once. This is normally an important operation, so it stops you doing anything by mistake, like resetting it. You never want to do that by accident. So that covers your model menu, and the other ones which you normally set up first time you use a radio we'll go through now. So you start with the system menu. In here you've got all the options relating to the system. Start off with a response. So here you've got the option for 2-channel or 4-channel. I always use 2-channel for racing. And then you've got the response speeds for both steering and the throttle. They range from normal, high speed and advance. I've currently got it set at the middle on high speed, and obviously you've got the same options for throttle. Okay, so these 3 options at the bottom are for your steering feel, your throttle feel and your brake feel. It ranges from -100 to +100. I'm currently set on -40 for steering, -50 for throttle and 0 for brake, as recommended by KO. Next setting in your system menu is the setup. Here is where you set up the trims and button for the radio. ET1 is under your steering stick, which is normally steering trim. ET2 by the side of your throttle stick for throttle trim. ET3 is the second vertical trim, which I use for brake, and ET4 is the dial above the steering, which I use for steering travel. I currently have the other 2 set to nothing, but if you want to change it, you just press enter and you go through the list of what you can use on that button or trim or dial. So that covers your buttons. Next option is your direct button menu setup. So obviously you've got 4 buttons down the left hand side of the radio, and these relate to whatever you choose here. So I've got button 1 for the main menu, button 2 is for the quick set menu, but there's all sorts of options you can have. Button 3, button 4, they're all for you to set and use how you wish. OP timer is the operational time of the radio. It just gives you a note of how long you've been using the radio. 2.4 gig band, this is where you set it for general or France. The France setting is used in France, general is for the rest of the world. Obviously to select this one you have to press and hold enter, as it's in a black box. Power management, this is where you set what type of cells you're using. You've got dry cell, nickel metal hydride, which is rechargeable cells, lithium polymer or lithium ion. On the next page we have the option to reset all settings, again in a black box. Make sure you don't do it by mistake. And finally we have ICS, which is where you can use a radio to set the KO ICS servos up. Okay, so once you've set up the system for radio, the next one I'd go to is function, and here you have a few more options of key things you'd like to set, personalise your radio. First one is monitor. This just shows you the travel of the sticks, make sure it's all working okay. This relates to the adjust steering and adjust throttle settings we spoke about earlier. Backlight allows you to set whether the backlight is always on, off or on through keystroke. and the time underneath is how long it stays on for after the last keystroke. Contrast, pretty simple, just sets the contrast for the screen. Sound volume, again pretty simple, the volume. The buzzer, you can pick which buzzer tone you want. I always have it off. And key repeat is just how quickly you can press two keys and it recognises it as two inputs. So once you've covered them menus, that's pretty much the radio set up to your personal liking. Okay, once you've set the radio up, you've selected the model you want to use, so in our case Model 1. The next thing you do is set up the radio to the car. The steering menu allows you to set all the functions relative to the steering on the car. Set up the steering, the first one I always do is sub-trim. Here you set the trim of the servo so that the car is going dead straight. To save the setting, press enter before pressing back. Otherwise you'll find that the setting doesn't actually save. Next for me is to set the balance. It's standard as 70% each side. Just adjust this so that you're getting full lock in both directions equally. You may need to adjust the steering travel. It goes from 0 to 150. As standard it comes in at 100, so you may need to up that for some cars, some servos. Okay, also on the steering menu you have the trim, which is also adjusted by just using ET1 if that's what you've set it to. You have the trim rate, which is how much the steering will move per each click of the trim. As standard it comes in 5, which is in the middle 1 to 10. You can also adjust the throttle one on this page. You have the option for turn speed, where you can adjust the speed of the travel to full lock, and return speed, which is the speed of the travel from full lock to neutral. You have steering punch, which just adds aggression to the steering. And on the final page you have a steering curve, which goes from negative up through positive, depending on how you want it to feel. And you also have steering reverse, where you can change both steering and throttle if necessary. You also have treble override, which when set to a key or button reduces the full lock or increases as you wish. Okay, next we have the throttle menu. In here it's very similar to the steering menu. You've got main differences. You have a brake point adjustment and a throttle high point adjustment to adjust the travel individually. You have the trim rates, turn speeds, punch, curve, reverse. You have this setting, which is drag brake, which can be set to a button or a trim, and basically this is just adds a percentage of drag brake. It's great for on the fly adjustments, so you don't need to adjust your speedo. You have brake override, same as steering override. ABS allows you to put some anti-lock braking through the servos or speedos. This can be set in this menu here. You have brake override, which is very similar to steering override. You have the option to add ABS, throttle acceleration, auto start and idle up, and that covers your throttle menu. This is the channel menu. This allows you to adjust between 3 and 4 channel for the radio. And the next menu is the quick setup menu. This just has quick links to the most commonly used menus, and this is useful for when you use a direct button to access it. And finally we have the timer menu, and in here you can set the stopwatch, you can set the down timer, and if used you can see your lap history. Next we have the adjust steering option. In here this is where you calibrate the steering pot, so basically you move the stick through its full travel range just a couple of times and you'll see the numbers change. Press and hold the enter key and that will save that setting, and the same for the throttle. This is just a calibration of the pots and should be done periodically. After adjusting them, you should reset up the servos and speedo in your car just to make sure they're correct. That covers the basics of the new menu system. So that's the overview complete. I hope you found it helpful and interesting, and I'll see you at the track soon.